torture, imprisonment, severe infection, drug use, and not only. Today, about 5 motor experiments that some people put on others. Brew some tea and sit more comfortably, dear ones, because this is scary. MK-Ultra, or the Mind Control Program. In the 1950s, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America was restructured. The communists revealed a substance that allows to control the human mind. The top of the country believed that similar methods of manipulating consciousness were used, especially against American prisoners during the Korean War. The United States of America also decided it was necessary to find their own, so to speak, unique method of consciousness control. The project, which was launched in April 1953, was named MK-Ultra. Its overseer was chemist Sidney Gottlieb. The experiments were largely focused on modifying human behavior. Electroshock, hypnosis, radiation, toxins, chemicals, and narcotics were used for this purpose. It doesn't sound very pleasant, of course, and who willingly subjected themselves to the experiment? In principle, there is no question here. Everyone should decide for themselves what to do with their own body and consciousness. Of course, as long as it doesn't harm others. Besides, there were those who were forced to participate in MK-Ultra. Even more, some probably didn't even suspect that they were part of this experiment. Under investigation were clear psychiatric patients, American soldiers, and even employees of the Central Intelligence Agency themselves. The CIA and Gottlieb set up secret centers throughout Europe and Asia, including in Japan, Germany, and the Philippines. People were thrown into chambers where they conducted these or other experiments, after which they were bombarded with questions. Researchers were trying to see if they could break a person's mind and find a way to erase human consciousness. James Whitey Bulger, a former criminal authority, spoke about his experience in the notorious MK-Ultra program.
Consumed by panic and paranoia, no appetite, hallucinations, years of paranoia and violence. The blood seemed to seep from the walls. Skeletons laughed before me. I watched as the room turned into a dog's head. I felt like I was losing my mind.
Baljoro and others were administering lysergic acid diethylamide and other drugs over the course of 18 months. The man said the prisoners were being deceived by a false path. Nobody told them they were helping to find a cure for schizophrenia. In case YouTube really doesn't like this release because of all the drugs and so on, there will be an uncensored version on the Telegram channel, so always subscribe. It's cool there. Journalist Stephen Kinzer, who investigated the matter, wrote,
Gottlieb wanted to gain control over the mind, and he thought it was a two-step process. First, it was necessary to destroy the existing mind. Secondly, it was necessary to find a way to put a new mind in the void that was created. He didn't go too far in the second, but he did almost everything to realize the first stage.
One of the most famous victims of MK-Ultra was the chemist Frank Olson. He was unknowingly given lysergic acid diethylamide, and then, 9 days later, he jumped out of a window and died as a result. According to Kinzer, Olson had a conversation with the leadership in which he expressed his dissatisfaction with the ethical side of the experiment and generally wanted to leave the CIA. In 1903, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MK-Ultra files to be destroyed. He feared the truth would come out. However, not all documents were destroyed because they were simply stored in a place where they were not supposed to be. The following year, in 1974, an article appeared in the New York Times. It was reportedly discussing MK-Ultra. The material prompted the United States of America to conduct an official investigation into the experiments of the 50s and 60s of the 20th century. And in 1975, the public received official confirmation. The CIA really conducted all these inhumane experiments. It's shocking. Not so kindly. The following year, President Ford issued a punishment that, among other things, banned experiments with narcotics on people due to the fallout of the information leak in written form and in the presence of an uninvolved party. Wait, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, and move on to the next experiment, known as the Stanford Prison Experiment. It was conducted in the summer of 1971. It's one of the most unethical psychological experiments in human history. The idea of this experiment was to simulate a prison environment over the course of 2 weeks. It would have been a great stroke, for example, compared to the same MK-Ultra. However, the experiment ended significantly earlier. Indeed, this study shows little about how the conditions in which people are kept and their role and status affect their behavior. The idea belongs to the professor of psychology at Stanford University, Philip Zimbardo. The experiment itself was funded by the U.S. Office of Naval Research, which was interested in understanding antisocial behavior and examining the conflict between military guards and prisoners. Participants for the experiment were recruited through an announcement that sounded something like this: college students needed for psychological study of prison life. You will receive $15 per day for a period of 1-2 weeks. Doesn't sound bad, does it? Adjusting for inflation, it's about $100 per day. For students, it's probably all right. Honestly, under the influence, 26 people were seriously injured. All of them belonged to the middle class and appeared psychologically stable and healthy. Also, none of them had a criminal past. After selection, participants were randomly assigned roles as either prisoners or prison guards. The prisoners had to stay in cells without any personal belongings, wear specially chosen robes, and also a chain around their ankle. They were also assigned numbers rather than names. The guards were given wooden batons and clothing similar to what real prison guards wear. They also had reflective sunglasses to prevent eye contact and create a sense of anonymity. Researchers instructed the guards, albeit gently, not to harm the prisoners and to treat them as equals. In short, to reinforce their powerlessness and make them submissive. By the second day of the experiment, at 2:30 in the morning, the prisoners had started a riot against the guards, waking them up with whistles and banging. The prisoners reacted by going into the street, destroying their number plates, and facing the guards. In order to regain control, the guards used fire extinguishers, stripped the prisoners of their clothes, and took away their mattresses. To prevent potential acts of disobedience, the guards isolated those prisoners who played a secondary role in the uprising. The organizers removed the possibility of going to the shower and toilet, so they had to manage their needs right in the cells. And they were also forced to do push-ups many times. The first one to leave the experiment was Douglas Corpy. After 36 hours, he became ill.
Jesus Christ, I'm burning up. I can't stand another night. I just can't take it anymore.
Corpse screamed. Scientists immediately sedated the man, but the experiment did not stop. He was suffering. On the fourth day, prisoner number 819 began to show signs of distress. He cried and screamed in his cell before being released immediately. The fifth day was set aside for family visits to further simulate the prison experience. However, the parents, having seen what was happening to their children, began to worry not in vain. Some of them even turned to lawyers immediately. After that, other scientists came to the scene with the verification, to see with their own eyes what was happening there. And they were shocked. The same day, improvised guards were putting mouse clothes on the prisoners' heads. After this verification, the anxiety and aggression that grew with each day, Zimbardo ended the experiment on the 6th day. What would have happened on the 14th? It's better we don't know. They concluded that a third of the guards exhibited sadistic behavior, which was not previously observed in these individuals. The study was criticized for its unethical and anti-scientific approach, but as strange as it may sound, it also had some positive outcomes. For example, juveniles charged with federal crimes are no longer housed with adults due to the risk of violence, largely as a result of this experiment. Since history has already set this scenario in motion, let's continue there. The next experiment, the study of malaria in the Stateville Penitentiary, which took place in 1944 in the United States of America. The prisoners were specifically infected with malaria in order to find a new drug for the disease and to understand what side effects might occur. This experiment, at the very least, was dubious from an ethical standpoint and was fully controlled by the U.S. Medical Research Committee, which signed a contract with the University of Chicago. Why was this experiment needed? It was because World War II caused a severe need for new methods of treating malaria. American soldiers were getting sick en masse when serving in the Pacific regions. However, the treatment known at that time with quinine was almost inaccessible, as Japan had established control over its supply to the United States of America. These factors necessitated the conduct of experiments on an unprecedented scale, with a particular emphasis on humans. They realized that this was the ideal environment for such research. It was simply a matter of selecting healthy men of the same age with similar health conditions. It was also easier to get them to participate in the experiment. Moreover, participants were promised not just to shorten their prison term, but also money. Adjusted for inflation, approximately from $500 to $2,000. First, they deliberately infected the prisoners and then checked their reaction to potential treatment. The problem was that most of the drugs they gave to the subjects were not sufficiently tested, so the doctors didn't even have data on their toxicity. In addition, to determine whether a drug was effective, scientists themselves prescribed the maximum permissible dose for humans to the subjects. In practice, this meant that the volunteers who participated in the experiment were given maximum doses of drugs to definitely trigger side effects. The consequences were lack of response and impotence. One participant suffered 2 heart attacks and another died. That's just what is generally known. Was it worth sacrificing to such victims? Judge for yourself. Plus, comments help promote the video. Indeed, after the experiment was completed, several scientific publications were released. But the results of the study had a very minimal long-term impact on malaria treatment methods. Moreover, in the 1946 Nuremberg trials, during which the leaders of former Nazi Germany were judged, these human experiments and research in Stateville were used as a point of defense for the Nazis. They argued in court that these experiments conducted in Stateville were very similar to those conducted by the Nazis. Moreover, they even had somewhat similar motives and procedures. Such a disturbing story brings us to yet another disturbing experiment, the study of syphilis in Tuskegee. The 40-year experiment is still remembered as one of the most egregious biomedical studies in U.S. history, for which President Bill Clinton even apologized on behalf of America. The experiment was conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service between 1932 and 1972. The goal of the experiment was to understand the potential effects of untreated syphilis. The study involved 600 black men, most of whom were poor. The men were chosen for several reasons. Firstly, it was believed that the effects of syphilis depended on race. Researchers assumed that African Americans were more susceptible to venereal diseases in principle. The experiment's authors were allegedly racist, but this is unconfirmed. Officially, the second reason lies in the fact that poor people, in the opinion of researchers, are less likely to turn to medical institutions for help. Well, that's pretty obvious. In the selected 399 volunteers, syphilis was diagnosed, and another 201 became a control group without infection. To entice people to participate, they were promised free medical help for bad blood. This is a euphemistic term under which fell a range of health problems, primarily anemia. But there's a catch. The patients who were really suffering from syphilis were not told that they were not being treated. Instead, they were just going to observe the progression of the disease until they died. When the study began, the treatment for syphilis was largely ineffective. Often not just ineffective, but deadly. Even after scientists realized that penicillin was effective in treatment, which was 25 years before the experiment ended, the men participating in the study were not offered treatment. Moreover, they made sure that the subjects did not receive treatment elsewhere. In 1966, a public health service investigator became concerned about the experiment. Peter Buxton wrote to the director of the U.S. Venereal Disease Department and drew attention to the unethical aspect of the study, but he was ignored. Still determined, Buxton passed the information about the study to the press, and in the summer of 1972, the story appeared in the leading American media. Then it became clear to everyone that for almost 40 years, men with syphilis had been deliberately left untreated, even though treatment was available. Over 100 subjects died from syphilis or its complications. After this, a special commission determined that the study was medically unjustified and ordered it to be stopped. In 1974, as part of a class action lawsuit brought by the study participants and their heirs, the U.S. government paid nearly $52 million in compensation. That's well and good, but even if you multiply that amount by 10, it won't make up for the lives lost. As I beat the drum, obviously, that's what I'm referring to. And about the hepatitis study in Willowbrook, which was conducted between 1956 and 1971 at the Willowbrook School in New York on children. At the time, Willowbrook was the largest school in the U.S. for children with intellectual disabilities. The reviews about this school were not the best throughout its existence. For example, children were left unattended there, they walked around naked or in diapers, and they were often tied to beds. In the first few decades of the school's existence, hepatitis outbreaks were a common occurrence. It's not surprising, given the state of medicine at the time, the school's sanitation, and its overcrowding, that the institution had 6,000 patients, even though it was only designed for 4,000. Indeed, in 1956, Dr. Saul Krugman proposed an experiment that he hoped would help better understand hepatitis and develop a vaccine. But to do this, according to Krugman, something had to be done. Nothing less than infecting children with hepatitis without their knowledge. Under the guise of research, they either injected the virus directly or fed them chocolate milk mixed with an extract made from the feces of other infected children. American pediatrician and vaccine expert Paul Allen Offit described Krugman's experiments as a heinous act.
One of the studies involved infecting healthy children with live hepatitis virus from the feces of infected children. Krugman observed as their skin and eyes turned yellow and their liver enlarged. He watched as they vomited and refused to eat. All the children infected with the hepatitis virus fell ill, some severely. Krugman reasoned that it was justified to infect the children with the virus, as most of them would eventually contract hepatitis anyway. But by deliberately infecting them, Krugman increased this chance to 100%.
Even then, part of the medical community was outraged and directly opposed to this experiment. But this did not stop Krugman. He saw it through to the end. This doctor found hepatitis A and B strains and sped up the creation of a hepatitis B vaccine, according to Paul Offit. But he also adds, "I don't think you have the right to infect a child with a virus that could kill her." Either way, Saul Krugman's superhuman experiments were just the beginning of his career. Later, he headed the pediatrics department at the New York University Medical School. Elected to the National Academy of Sciences, he wrote a textbook on childhood infectious diseases, won the prestigious Lasker Award, and contributed to developing the first measles and mumps vaccines. The Willowbrook School itself only operated for 1 year after this experiment and was closed down. Dear viewers, if you've watched this video up to this second, you know that you are the best, simply the best. I really appreciate that you are still with me all this time. Don't forget that this channel exists because of you. Don't hesitate to like, comment, and if you have the opportunity, sponsor on YouTube, which is available from 10 hryvnias per month. Take care of your health, both mental and physical. Sonia was with you. See you next week. While you're here, check out these videos. They're cool, promise. That's it.